Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this particular video, I will be performing an analysis on the tale known as Peter Pan. In Peter Pan, we see essentially a child that which stemmed from Neverland, a place where you do not grow up. Within Neverland, we see his enemy, an adult, that which is within the place that which you do not grow up, known as Neverland. And in said conflict, we actively see Peter Pan essentially leave Neverland in order to recruit more children to never grow up and to exist within Neverland, the same that he did in order to combat his conflict for him, and ultimately it is him that must face, in the end, his battle. Now, where might we see a similar mentality to that of a person that never grew up, or a child that refuses to grow up? You can find that in a narcissistic drug addict, a person that which stemmed from never growing up as a result of living in Neverland. In biblical terms, Neverland was called the land of Zod, the dream world, from which you could say, when looking at Captain Hook, an adult, a pirate within Neverland, an adult that which never grew up. And in his characterization, you now see Captain Hook is represented as a pirate, a thief of sorts, someone that doesn't have a means of a moral ground, you could say, which is the enemy of Peter Pan. In Peter Pan, we see the child that which never grew up and continuously seeks to create more children that never grow up, just as he did. And in this initial conflict, we then see the mentality driven behind the tale of Peter Pan. That which being, if you live in Neverland, whether a child or an adult, you never grow up. What is the driving source of this notion? Upon temptation, you might find a particular fruit that which leads to being banished from the garden because you now exist elsewhere in Neverland, you could say. A place where you may feel beautiful things, but as a result, your mentality as an individual never grows up. Now you might say, who am I to say anything? You use drugs to combat your trauma. But are the drugs truly taking care of healing said trauma, or are you simply running away from said trauma? Pursuing Neverland, never facing life, never taking on responsibility. In life, you do not survive if you do not take on responsibility. It is a fundamental root behind human nature. In order to survive, you must be responsible, and if you are not responsible, you do not survive independently. Which then begs the question of why do we live in a society if we cannot depend on one another? But are the others' work ethic a means for you to survive simply because, once again, you just simply cannot grow up? Get past that point. You might see me speak from a tougher perspective. This is known as what is known as tough love. Sometimes you must be told the truth in a way that hits you without being hit as a result, you could say. But in understanding the fundamental nature of Peter Pan, a piper of sorts, you could say, from which said piper leads other children to Neverland, where they forever exist in Neverland. So who ultimately is the bad guy in the story? Is it truly Captain Hook, the pirate with zero moral compass, an adult within Neverland that seeks to extinguish Peter Pan? Or is Peter Pan the true villain, he whom brings the children to Neverland so they may suffer just as he did within Neverland and never grow up as a result? Who is ultimately making the decision at this point? Which now arises a placement of your moral compass. Where do you sit in it all? Whether a child or an adult existing within Neverland. Where do you do from here? What do you do from here? At some points you realize the fruits of your success as an adult. But as an adult or an individual that simply does not grow up, do you see the current state of your life not developing further beyond the fundamental boundary you are placing upon yourself simply because you essentially have created a shell? And said shell is rather brittle. And because it's so brittle, you do not grow up. And the only way you feel grown up is by being alone in Neverland. Where is your life ultimately going? Within reality or within Neverland? Because the decision is entirely yours at this particular point. If you live in Neverland, you may see life in reality in a very negative way. If you live life in a positive way in reality, you may see Neverland in a negative way. Ultimately, the individual's moral compass decides that for the individual. But as individuals that seek to live in Neverland, how are you to tell those that live in reality how reality functions? You have not grown up entirely. You got stuck and you did not leave out of Neverland. And in getting stuck began the addiction, the usage, and all things that amplified the experience of Neverland. And the more you sought, the more you brought forth with you to Neverland, causing other individuals to themselves not grow up. Where is the nature of the archetype behind the tale of Peter Pan? It is an ancient folklore regarding the individual's moral compass. Both Peter Pan and Captain Hook are both villains in the tale. But in the depiction of beauty, of the innocence of a child not choosing to grow up, we identify Peter Pan as the protagonist because he is against all odds at that particular point. But in being against all odds, what is the reason he is against all odds? He refuses to grow up. He wishes to stay a child his entire life and make other children stay a child their entire life themselves. In civilization, also known as reality, what would you essentially say would be a problem in that particular scenario? To see individuals pulling others into Neverland. Where might you see this be problematic? To essentially have individuals causing individuals to essentially say they themselves don't want to grow up either. And the more we have seen this folklore, also known as an archetypal story within civilization, you see this folklore has essentially developed exponentially. In the tale of Peter Pan, you find the piper. What is the piper? Him who plays the flute, but in the song of the flute, the piper. What is, you could metaphorically place the piper as an individual seeking to introduce you to a new drug. Come join Neverland with me. It'll be fun. We'll never go back from there. Do you see this mentality of how a drug addict in itself destroys civilization? Because the more we popularize drugs, the more we popularized essentially the destroyment of reality. From one individual can be brought forth 2 to 3 or more into drugs, and we have seen this exponentially develop. Which in this exponential development, look at the current state of the world today. Neverland is now here, and here is now in Neverland. Paradoxically, metaphorically, of course. But in that particular understanding, the more we maintain a soft love, because why did the children in the first initial incident seek to join Peter Pan? To join him to go to Neverland. There was an argument or a disciplinary measure, a trauma, from which said trauma, the children then said, I choose not to grow up beyond this point. So yes, I will join you on this tremendous adventure in Neverland, where I will never grow up beyond that point of discipline, that point of trauma. You might see a victim-like mentality being driven behind the nature of a child at that particular point, which the more a victim-like mentality is embraced within society, we see people as adults behaving as children. Temper tantrums and all. As a grown adult throwing a temper tantrum, also known as being triggered. Where is Peter Pan? Where is the Piper? Well, you might be taking a toke right now, but ultimately, what do you think you're pursuing the more you chase entering Neverland? And look at the current state of your life. If it's pretty good, you found perfect balance. Congratulations. It's a great feeling. And understanding, however, that for an individual so deeply lost within Neverland, in order to leave Neverland, you may never again use anything to permanently leave Neverland. A notion such as the derivative known as a Nazarite within biblical literature. A Nazarite is an individual that does no longer induce fruit of a wine or an alcohol, a spirit, due to them being themselves a presenting force of a particular meaning behind their existence. Ultimately, in finding your self-growth, I invite you to find what is the meaning of your life. And in the first statement you say within your own mind, beyond that question, you just answered the question. What is the meaning of your life? And does that meaning have a correct definition to the way you wish your life to be. Because if it doesn't, you might have to leave Neverland from that point and begin a rebirth or a resurrection, you could say. A phoenix arising from the ashes. Leaving behind the childlike mentality, experiencing said ego death of the childlike mentality, and finally entering adulthood. Thank you.